So we're going to share with you the story of the Jooay app as a technological solution to a particular health issue or health concern. So the health issue that we're focusing on is the ability for children with disabilities to participate fully in different leisure activities. So let's see, beginning with the evidence in the literature. What do we know from research about participation in leisure for children with disabilities? So first of all, we know that leisure is very important to the health of all children. So if we look at this literature, whether it's children with disabilities or without disabilities, participating in physical activities, in sports, and recreation is very important for physical health. It decreases obesity, osteoporosis, diabetes. Also, it's important for cardiovascular health. What is less well appreciated is leisure, its relationship to mental health. And particularly if we think about leisure activities very broadly, so not only physical sports types of activities, but also social activities, arts, music, so more skill-based types of activities, different types of recreation, is very important for mental health. In terms of decreasing stress and anxiety, but also in terms of building a child's identity formation and their sense of mastery, their motivation, their achievement motivation. And it's also very important for social connections, being with their peers and other people in their community that are important for them. So it's clear that leisure is very closely tied to the health, physical and mental health of children. And indeed, it's widely endorsed by the World Health Organization, by Canadian and American pediatric societies, by various position papers. Canada has a healthy living strategy that really promotes physical activity for health. There's the participation initiatives as well. So it's certainly widely endorsed at a more policy level to have children be active. And for us, the activity is not just physical, but social and skill-based activities as well. So what do we know about leisure participation in children with disabilities? Well, we and others have done a series of studies to look at this particular area. And it doesn't matter if you're looking at kids with physical disability like cerebral palsy, or children with autism or arthritis, or children who had a very high risk newborn delivery, like premature babies that are now older and have coordination problems or learning problems. It's always very consistent that their participation is less than their peers. They're not participating fully when compared to their peer group in various types of physical activities, but also there's a decrease in other types of activities too. But their enjoyment of activities is really at the same level as their peers. So whatever activities they're doing, they're really enjoying, and it's very important for them. But they do want to be doing more social activities and more physical activities. So it's not that they don't want to do it, and that's why they don't participate. They want to do these activities, but there are various barriers that prevent them from participating fully in physical and social activities. So what are some of these barriers? So what we and others have looked at is a wide range of factors within the child and in the environment that can influence participation. So for sure, if the child has different activity limitations, if they have communication problems, physical limitations, some intellectual disabilities, these definitely limit their ability to participate fully. It poses certain barriers. But also if you look at the child, the age of the child has an influence. So just in general, as children get older towards adolescence, their participation levels drop. You do see differences between boys and girls in terms of the types of activities they want to do and that they do. There are cultural differences, so if you look at different parts of the world and also rural, urban communities, you do see some differences based on what the cultural preferences are. For sure, the most important predictor of participation is preference. So what it is you want to do very much influences what you end up doing, which is true for all of us. But sometimes they really want to do certain things, but the actual participation is difficult. Motivation is very important, particularly for children with disabilities, because initially they may want to do a lot of things, but with time, because of the barriers, they give up easily. So there's a fear of failure, or they worry about their ability to participate and feel included. So their motivation with time decreases. So they have a problem with mastery motivation. Also self-efficacy, their belief in themselves. So we can see two children with the same disabilities, and one is super active and involved and the other one isn't. So their own self-confidence and their belief in themselves in terms of what they can achieve is also very important. In the environment, there are many factors as well that can influence participation. There's socio-demographic factors, financial factors, because some adapted sports, for example, could be quite expensive. Having access to information, knowing what's available in the community is a very important factor, and we'll get back to that shortly. The type of school you're in. So segregated versus integrated schools, they have different advantages and disadvantages in terms of exposure to different leisure participation opportunities. And also having access to rehab services, especially as you get older. You have less chance of having services that may help you in adapting activities to be able to do the leisure activities you want to do. Also, it depends where you live. So some programs are close to you, but as you get to more rural settings, there may be less opportunities available. Also, what policies exist and the extent to which certain policies are actually funded to support that policy of inclusion. So there are many things that can contribute to whether a child is participating or not participating. Also, it's important to emphasize that participation is a right of all children, and so that includes children with disabilities. So there is the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, that all people have the right to participate, and there are specific articles in the convention on recreation, leisure, and sport. So this includes leisure activities as a right, that it's a human right to be able to participate. And also in the Convention on the Rights of the Child have specific articles about the right to play. So certainly this should be provided. So whatever barriers exist, it's up to society to overcome those barriers for the individuals. Keiko was fortunate to participate in the UN Committee on the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disability in Geneva last year. And she was a key player in emphasizing, because when they talk about the rights of persons with disabilities, the discussion is mostly on adults. So she was pushing the agenda for children in terms of rights of children with disabilities. And two major points that came out is that often children who are in segregated schools, so the schools for special needs children, they're all on transportation to go home after school, so they don't necessarily benefit from extracurricular leisure activities that children in regular schools benefit from. Also, there should be some funding earmarked to enable children to participate. So it's very difficult for families to find financial support to help promote participation. So knowing that this is a problem and children want to participate and it's important for their health, what can we actually do? So there are many strategies that are possible. Here we see, for example, adapted playgrounds, so adapting the world around the child, so making it more accessible here for a child who's blind. Having mentors or aides that help do the activity with the child, so provide the support that's needed. by another individual, having adapted transport to allow the child to get to the different programs as they get older so they can be more independent and able to get to these programs. So these are just some of the strategies. Certainly when we were looking at children with cerebral palsy, what was clear to us up here is the number of different obstacles or that limit accessibility to participation. And for children who walk, this is walking without any limitations, so there's no barriers. Walking but having some limitation, and then unable to walk, so let's say in a wheelchair, for example. So certainly with physical limitations and mobility, there are many, many barriers that become evident in their day-to-day life in terms of participation. So that's something that, in some countries address it better than others. This was an extensive literature review looking at what can communities do to promote participation. So what does the literature tell us about different interventions that are possible to make it easier for children to participate? So if we look at, if we want to promote inclusion, we can adapt the tasks in different ways so that children will be able to do them. So there are many ways of doing that depending on the task. Having mentors or aides that work with the child, so to help the child to be able to participate and be included. Making sure the spaces around the child are inclusive in just the way they're constructed, so having the proper adaptations in the environment. Capacity building is also really important, so the people who are providing the programs, whether it's the staff or the coaches or whatever specialists are working to give the programs, they need to learn from others strategies about how to help include children with disabilities. So having some kind of networks that help people share knowledge, and sometimes specific training is really required in terms of how to enable a child with autism or with CP to be part of the dance group or whatever it is that the activity is. And some training and understanding what physical milestones are, like how to promote, understand what are the next steps that children are learning in terms of their development, to having a better understanding of that. So the training piece is important. But then there's all kinds of accessibility issues. So it has to be individualized because every child faces different access problems. So really understanding what that child's specific problem is, and then providing the adaptive equipment that's necessary or the environment that is adapted appropriately to meet the needs of all people. Financial support is often helpful in providing the resources and services that are needed. The peer mentors is important for access sometimes. And sometimes you have to bring in specialists to help consult and provide some solutions. So that's another approach. So there are many different things that can be done. In one study, parents of children with cerebral palsy in Quebec, they were asked, well, how do you find out about different leisure programs? Like, how do you get information in general about leisure? And the most popular way is by looking online, trying to search for different resources. They sometimes get it from other parents. Sometimes big cities have guides for people with disabilities. Sometimes clinicians, so that's why the importance of they're still getting some rehabilitation services. They may learn from their OT, for example, what services, adapted programs are available in the community. But certainly online is what people go to naturally. So that was something that was of interest to us. The other thing is most people think that people don't access leisure programs because they're too expensive. But when asked, the family income was sufficient in most cases to support leisure participation. So it wasn't a financial issue. What was more of an issue is knowing about which adapted leisure programs are actually available for their child. So which programs are out there if they want to do adapted yoga or they want their child to go swimming. what programs are near their home that are either adapted or have an inclusive approach that help all children participate. So that was what really piqued our interest and was really the sparks for Jooay. So I think Keiko's now going to tell you the Jooay development.
So based on a lot of this research, we found that families actually don't know about what's out there, and different than the regular parent or the regular youth or clinician looking for an activity. If you want to do swimming, if you want to take whatever class, you Google, you go on the city booklet, you find this information. What happened is, it seems to be that for children with disabilities and their families, there was really not enough information, easy to find, in a way that makes sense and that would be adapted to the child's needs. So just to spark the conversation, so we knew more or less, this is not a research study, but it's a marketing information that 70% of Canadians, which I actually thought would be more, but apparently 70% of Canadians have smartphones, right? So we still have a 30% of people who don't, but most people are, sorry?
Probably babies. And
I think this was adults, I don't know, I won't quote, but anyways, most people do, but not everybody yet. I don't know, that's actually data from 2016, so maybe we should see what's the update on that. But most people also are using their phones. Of course, we know that smartphones way more than just talking, right? Actually, way less talking and more to do different things and access leisure opportunities, right? So from you here, how many of you use Yelp? Do you have it? That's a small sample. Nobody uses Yelp? Okay. So do you know what Yelp is though? So Yelp is an app to find restaurants, right, in different, pretty much anywhere in the world. But it lists restaurants based on GPS location, where you are. There are reviewers, people saying this is good, this is bad, go here, don't go there, price and other information like that. It's a good app, download it. Yeah, it's free. We're not making money out of this, I promise. Then TripAdvisor. Yes, more. Oof. Okay, so TripAdvisor is also to locate, hotels and attractions, tourist attractions in different cities. And with the same thing, people interact and see what they rate, what they think about those different activities. So essentially, in relation to leisure, those apps help finding places, right, of different types of leisure. There are also several apps that are meant to support health behaviors, right? So that's one of the many gazillion apps for running. Do you know this? Or does anyone use any app for health, like running or health or dieting or something like that? No? People. What's happening to you? This is a typical sample.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so there are several apps that are meant to both provide motivation, accountability, so people have, ranks of what are you doing, how often are you doing, are you achieving certain goals based on the information that you input into the app. Who knows what this app is? Anyone? No? Tinder? Do you know what? Anyone? You don't need to tell if you use Tinder. So also leisure related, right? But to help finding people, let's say. So that's an important type of leisure, right? That people use it for that purpose. So that's really helping connecting. There are also other apps that are more for like passive type of leisure, right? Spotify. Anyone? Let's try. No, not even Spotify. Yes, because that's for music, right? So same thing. What all those apps have in common is that they offer options, right, of things to do, places to go, activities to choose from. They are accessible in the sense that all of those are free. You can download from your phone anywhere you are. You can click and find whatever information you're looking for. They do give information about close to where you live or work or where you are, GPS based for most of them. I don't know if Tinder does that. I don't have Tinder, but most of them have a location component to it, right? So you don't have to go somewhere else to find activity.
You decide how far they could be.
The range, yes. I actually think for most apps you do not decide, the app decides. It's like it depends on the background settings. It's not the user who decides how far, or for some, I don't know. Yeah. Then almost all of them are practical, right? It's something quick, easy, like it doesn't require much skills to access. It's fun, most of them, right? It is related to something that is fun, gives some pleasure in doing it and interacting with people. It is engaging and it builds community, right? So for all of those, there are things in common that people have when using the app, and that's also supportive. And there's some studies in terms of communication and health that might be pertinent. That show that when people find, they use more a resource, whatever it is, when they can find other people, and that helps them, create some level of connection with the other people using that same resource. So what we did is in trying to find solutions to the problem we had at hand, which is we know that children with disabilities, they participate less in leisure activities, and that has all the health consequences that we were talking about. We brought together in 4 different forums different groups of stakeholders, so children, youth with disabilities, parents, healthcare providers, educators, policymakers, community grassroots representatives in 4 forums in Montreal, in Toronto, Vancouver, and Calgary. And we asked them, what everybody has to say around the table, because that's what research is saying. Okay, those children are participating less. But we wanted to hear from the people to communicate them. We have this information, what do you think about that? We also want to identify from the grassroots what are the priorities, right? So we didn't want as researchers to say, oh, that's how we should go about this. We wanted really to hear what people thought was most important, or what if you were to do one thing, what you would do, right? So what actions, what interventions we could think together that could help promoting participation. And then what are the actionable items? So not only what we can talk about, we know there are several problems to resolve in the world, but what we can do something about it, that are very concrete actions. So from those forums, what we came up with, in each one of them, there was we went through a process to help them identify the priority items. So what in each city, right, in each region you wanted to work on. And we came up with those 4 top priorities from those groups. The first one across the board, and that was really for, in all the different forums, the first priority was developing a common resource, right? So a repertoire of activities, of something that people could go on. It was not necessarily an app at this point, but an app was, people chose that as a good way to go about that. Also, one of the groups chose the peer mentorship for parents and youth, because they found that many parents don't know how to go about finding, adapting, thinking creatively of how to support their child participation. And also youth with disabilities, they may not know how to integrate resources, so they might need types of supports or someone, a peer mentor that would go with them, that would teach them, that would coach them. So that was a second priority. Also, to think about school-based programs. So what are the things that can be done in the school settings? Because while most children after a certain age are not in the rehab centers anymore, they're not being followed by health, but they're all in school, right? So what can we do through the school programs that can help us also promote participation? And how can we inform policy? So that would be the 4th point, the policy tables. Can we inform the creation of new policies, new legislation, new programs at a higher level that could help supporting participation at a systems level, right? So out of those actions that we that were prioritized, we picked we're going to talk to you about the Jooay app, which is the first solution we came up with. At the time we thought, oh yes, let's make an app that's going to be so easy. It's so not easy. We know now, but we did regardless. Yeah, it's like, yeah, we did $2,000, that doesn't do it, so it doesn't do it. But we came up through different funding opportunities and applications through a variety of different resources that you can see listed down there, that if the solution was to create a central list, right, of adapted or inclusive, and the difference here being adapted would be programs that are exclusively for children with disabilities, versus inclusive, which is programs that are for all children and also for children with disabilities. So we wanted to find both, because it seems that there are advantages to both types of programs, and children benefit from some from others. And how they can be used, by families, healthcare providers, community programs, everybody, to build community, going back to that component, and then create an online community of support for parents, so that we also address a little bit of that peer mentorship component that was also seen as an important priority. So that's how the Jooay app was born 3 years ago already. And the target audience was really parents, youth with disabilities, healthcare providers, educators, teachers in different settings, community organizations, and provincial and national organizations as well. And the interest for the app has really grew a lot in all those different groups, so we'll talk more about that. The app itself, so you can go download it. You should all do download. I have cards here if you want to take. It's a free for download. Actually, if you didn't download yet, wait until March, because we have a new second version coming up, which will be available for both iOS and Android. Right now it's just iOS, but it's coming up. So what we were able to do with the app is to search for specific activities, just like Yelp or TripAdvisor or any of those. Add activities as well. So some regions, some areas where we had a extensive search strategy developed to identify those activities, but there's like some small cities or regions where we don't know programs exist, so you can suggest and add activities through the app as well. You can share your experiences and questions, right? So both through a chat feature that will be available in this new version, that you can talk to users, but also through emails back and forth with the group, and also through the Facebook community spaces, and then connect with other users, know who is around you. Maybe there's a parent with a child with a disability type and they don't know any other parent with a disability, but they may find each other through the community, and then help both their kids participate, engage in different activities, exchange ideas, and that's what we wanted to convey within the app. And also to find other relevant resources. So through the app, we link to a website. It's the Childhood Disability link, that we have a list of, for example, lay summaries of research related to leisure. We have a list of policies supporting leisure participation in the different provinces across Canada. We have other studies related to childhood disabilities, but really a website meant to inform or to communicate research evidence to the public, right, in a language that is accessible, that is useful, hopefully, and that targets different areas related to childhood disability, so people can get guided to that resource as well. So that's the website. It's jooay.com, and so the app has 3 platforms as of March. So both the web-based app, the Android and the iOS. We have a really big list of, for example, just in Montreal there are 157 activities currently and growing, but we have activities listed across all provinces. You see some provinces have more, others less, but we are working on building those lists across all provinces, and as I mentioned, we do get suggestions every week. We get at least 10 new suggestions of activities in the different provinces through the app itself, that people send us, hey, add my program, hey, we're doing this, we're doing that. All information is verified, checked, and then entered. So this is ongoing. The numbers change every day. But the important thing is that, through the mapping, you can really find activities anywhere. And also, we'll talk more about like where you cannot find activities, how we are addressing that from the research side. So we have over 1,000 users, over 1,000 activities, 1,500 plus activities right now listed across Canada. We do have active users each month, which, and I don't know who's familiar with app-based research like this, it's really hard to keep people engaged. Most people have on average 40 apps on their phone, and I can't remember the right percentage, but the majority of them only opens the app once. You download, you never use it, or you download it, you open at the very moment, and then you never come back to it. So that's a common behavior with app usage. But so we have a good audience of people who keep coming to it every month. And we have 200 plus sessions per month, lots of engagement on Facebook now. So we do have a group that I'll talk more about that is really to support people in promoting leisure for their child or their clients. So our users are, the majority, as you can see, are parents and healthcare professionals. So I find a lot of physical therapists, occupational therapists who want to refer their clients to find resources in the community where they live, so they use the app. Some didn't say what they are, but also community educators, and we're growing the number of community organizations who are now getting interested in the app as well. So the YMCA is a good example. Like, they offer activities, they want to partner, they want to do things together. So like, okay, can we help creating new programs and then promoting the programs through the app? So we are trying to establish those partnerships. We see the use, so those are a few events we've done. We've participated in leisure fairs and stuff, but also we see that engagement with the app increases. So people download more or find more information, access the app actually during the registration time for activities, right? So before spring, before winter, before fall registration, and also before summer camps registration, so that we know that people are actively looking for activities, and we're glad that hopefully they can find information there. We have created, again, based on the stakeholders' request, this community of support for parents. Our master student has just finished a pilot study looking at what the components, what people are looking for when accessing communities, online communities, right? So what's helpful, what's not helpful, how do we build a community through Facebook? So we have used a series of prompts, asking the members, is there any an advice or program and activity that has increased the interest of your child? How did you find them? How has participation in the community changed your child dynamic or in your household dynamic, so that people can share those experiences? What challenges you had to overcome, and how did you go about that? That was a very popular topic, because people are really sharing, my child wanted to do soccer, but the soccer league in my neighborhood, they wouldn't accept him. But then I spoke to someone else, and then I brought my partner was the coach, then the assistant coach. So all sort of solutions that people can discuss and find common ground to promote that behavior. And also we're sharing experiences from adapted services, new resources that come up across the country that people can input and then have this their experiences validated, but also find new strategic ways to go about promoting participation for their child. So parents thought that the community in general, so from the pilot study, that was really useful. It did contribute, people were responsive. They said, those are people I would like to meet. Many parents find that the experience of parenting a child with disability can be very isolating, whereas you don't know who to talk to and who will understand what you have to say, what your concerns and problems are. And through the community, they found a space to share that as well. So that's the word cloud that came from the community. They found motivation, information, practical solutions, and support, which then we expanded. So the community, the pilot study was just for parents in Montreal until December. It was just 12 parents sharing during the pilot study. We have since opened, and just from December to now, we have almost 100 users. People who, so the group was secret before, now it's a closed group, but we have almost 100 participants now. People want to join, so we are seeing that there's a need and an interest on that as well. So a little bit of the research that we're doing with the app, so that's a bit of the facts, but we are also trying to build a whole research program behind it, and use, how can we use technology to inform research, to inform healthcare, to inform the new directions that we're taking on research. So largely through the Child Bright strategic patient-oriented research program, co-funded with support from the Montreal Children's Hospital Foundation, and also through another grant from Employment and Social Development Canada. We are developing a series of different studies around the app. So creating and testing communities of support is what we finished this pilot study. We're now going to be open for other studies within the community. Mapping existing patterns of use, so identifying how people use this information and how that relates or doesn't relate to behavior changes, right? So the fact that, so people are saying, okay, we don't have the information, that's why we're not participating, one of the reasons. Now you have the information, does that change your behavior? Does that make you or supports your child in participating? So we want to understand how this mobile health can support that type of behavior change as well. And also how information disseminates, right? So how people hear about the app, where they go to find those resources, so that our communication strategies or our knowledge translation and dissemination can meet those needs, right? So that we know when we have research-based information to communicate, where do we go, how do we go to address and reach this population. We also want to engage with community organizations, which is something, and as researchers we don't do as much, but really trying to identify, these community organizations, they have a variety of programs that they're doing, how they're doing this, can we also inform research to them and have them changing or adapting or improving their programs based on research evidence, and how we can increase those partnerships also. In terms of mapping inequities in service provision to inform policy, so we are now in the process of partnering with different cities and countries and seeing how we can use the information that is mapped in the app to look, for example, how the inequity in distribution of services. So we know there are lots of resources in the big cities. So if you go in Montreal, it's good, you have activities everywhere. But as far as you go to the further regions, into the région, you find less and less activities, to the point that, the child who lives somewhere in Chicoutimi or somewhere farther, they won't have anything to go. Neither inclusive programs as well. So they would be very isolated, and what are the consequences for that? So we're trying to use that to inform policy in terms of resource allocation as well. What are the gaps, right? And how can we address that? Most of our research is based, we're using this health behavior framework to really try to explain, within the environmental variables, so within the context, how the health policy environment, the community the care system, the built environment, the barriers and accessibility, so how all the environmental components and social norms guide or influence the behavior we are interested in changing, which is really participation in leisure. How intentions at the individual level, from the point where the parent or the youth is downloading the app to the point that they get to go to an activity and do that regularly, to the point that can change or improve their health. There's a long path there, so we're trying to understand more about that. And also what other demographic factors that may influence. So all of this is being considered into those different research studies that are ongoing. As we move forward, we are really trying to develop more and more collaborations. So as I mentioned, there is an interest from the City of Montreal, City of Laval, some cities in BC as well, from the city councillors. It's kind of a trendy, hot topic to include and promote participation or promote things for people with disabilities in general. It's also very timely from the policy side for Canada. Canada just reported last year for the first time on their actions, Canada as a country, on their actions towards the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. this year, the country is reporting on actions towards the Convention on the Rights of Children. So there's a timely interest in showing that people are doing things. So a way to show is actually establish collaborations and concrete services and information for families. So that's what we're trying to capitalize on. But also with parents, healthcare providers, educators, everybody, athletes. We just or discussed a collaboration with the Canadian Paralympics Committee, with the Canadian Coaches Association. So everybody, not everybody, but a lot of organizations have invested interest in improving that, and we are glad to improve in those collaborations. In terms of exchange and inspiration, we do look into children, youth, and families, right? That's really the big goal. And we have them engaged in all of the projects and initiatives that we are working on. So people are really at the center of everything we do. We really count on, we have parents as part of the research group, which is something that the Child Bright research program has focused on, is really improving stakeholder engagement in all the steps of the research process. So we are doing that by having parents telling us, do this, do that, no, don't do this, don't do that, stop doing this, and guiding a lot of our research direction. So that's really interesting. We do develop in the design of the app, yeah. So we are now getting on the last phases of the design with the company that is doing the version 2 that is coming up, and each new design feature, or like, should you include this or should we delete this, we send to our parents and to our board of people. It's like, tell us, is this good, is this not good, use this language or change, this is not accessible, this color scheme is not good. So all of this, even from the design but also on the content. It's all being informed by the users at large. So that we aiming at creating really trust relationships and partnerships for real with the users and the people we are communicating with. So we hope the vision is really to have cities and places that are accessible, inclusive for all, right? Where children with disabilities can play and have fun. That you don't have to, go, which is very common now. That we know you might live in the South Shore, and the only activity that accommodates what your child wants to do is up somewhere in Laval, or you live in Quebec, and the only thing is adapted is in summer. So we really want to support and invest on creating these communities where everybody can play and have fun. We have other projects that are associated with it. So this whole initiative of the forums it's what we call the Child Leisure Net. And as I mentioned, a lot of the information, if you're interested in knowing more in terms of the research, is on the childhooddisability.ca website. Which is bilingual, yes. Jooay is also the website. Jooay website will also be bilingual as of March. Right now we're working in the plugin, but it will be, the app is fully bilingual, by the way. It goes with the language of your phone. So if you have a French interface on the phone, the content will show in French. We're also working with Sports for Life, which is another Canadian organization in developing an inclusive physical literacy toolkit for children with disabilities to be in community programs. There are projects related to the rights of children with disabilities and informing policy at the federal and provincial level. And we've carried a policy table in BC, in Vancouver in December. We're going to do another one in Quebec very soon, in the spring, summer. To discuss, concrete policy actions towards promoting participation based on evidence, using research to inform real policies at the or changes at the policy and systems level as well. We have a gigantic team of people working in the background, students, parents, professionals, a lot of people that you can see here. So I want to thank all of them for the hard work. We're now developing the local ambassadors. So in each province, we have a Jooay ambassador that help us identify the resources in the provinces and also disseminate the information. Yeah, so our marketing strategy, but it's really toward, like, those are really people who are knowledgeable about their resources, their local community's needs, and they are either healthcare providers or parents or representatives of different associations, and that's a really interesting different project that we are investing on too. And lots of funding partners as well through the history of developing an app. So that's one message: developing an app is not easy. It's not cheap, but it's we're hoping it's a worthwhile effort. And the fact that we have at least over 1,000 people using it for now, this is indicates a good sign and potential for to be a useful resource for all. So that is it. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to take it.